Countries that were never colonized. Throughout history, nations have risen and fallen, empires have expanded and collapsed, and entire civilizations have been reshaped by one powerful force: colonialism. From Africa to Asia, the Americas to the Pacific, European powers left their mark almost everywhere. But, did you know there are a few countries that managed to resist? Some stood their ground in battle. Others played brilliant games of diplomacy. And a handful were simply too tough, or too smart, to be conquered. Today, we're uncovering the incredible stories of the nations that were never colonized. 1. Japan, the rising sun that could not be conquered. Let's begin with Japan. In the mid-19th century, Japan was a closed-off society. For over 200 years, it lived in isolation under the Tokugawa shogunate, with almost no foreign contact. But in 1853, American warships under Commodore Matthew Perry appeared in Edo Bay, demanding that Japan open its ports. Many nations faced with Western military power crumbled. But Japan took a different path. Instead of resisting militarily, the Japanese leadership realized that survival meant transformation. This led to the Meiji Restoration in 1868, a period where Japan rapidly modernized, adopting Western technology, government systems, and even military strategies. In less than 50 years, Japan turned itself from a feudal society into a global power. And here's the twist: by the early 20th century, Japan wasn't just avoiding colonization, it became a colonizing empire itself, taking over Korea, Taiwan, and parts of China. Japan's story is one of adaptation. By embracing change, it ensured that no European empire could ever put it under colonial rule. 2. Thailand, Siam, the master of diplomacy. Now, let's travel to Southeast Asia. Almost every country in the region, Burma, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, fell to European powers. All, except one, Thailand, known then as Siam. How did Siam survive when surrounded by colonized neighbors? The secret was diplomacy. Kings Mongkut and Chulalongkorn skillfully played Britain and France against each other. Whenever one demanded concessions, Siam gave just enough to avoid invasion, ceding small territories like Laos and parts of Cambodia, but never surrendering the heart of the nation. At the same time, the kings modernized the country, reforming education, the military, and infrastructure. These changes made Siam look less like a backward target and more like a respectable ally. So, while the British controlled Burma to the west and the French ruled Indochina to the east, Siam stood proudly in the middle, independent, resilient, and uncolonized. Thailand is often called the buffer state that outsmarted empire. 3. Liberia, a nation born free. Liberia's story is very different. In the early 19th century, the American Colonization Society began resettling freed African Americans along the West African coast. In 1847, these settlers declared the creation of Liberia, with its capital Monrovia named after US President James Monroe. Unlike its African neighbors, which were carved up by European empires during the scramble for Africa, Liberia remained free. Yes, it was heavily influenced by the United States, but it was never formally colonized. For Africans, Liberia symbolized hope, a land where black people could govern themselves, free from colonial domination. However, this freedom came with complications. Tensions between the Americo-Liberians, descendants of freed slaves, and the indigenous peoples created divisions that shaped Liberian politics for centuries. Still, Liberia proudly stands as one of the only African countries never colonized. 4. Ethiopia, the Lion of Africa. Next, we head to East Africa, to the highlands of Ethiopia. When Italy tried to colonize Ethiopia in the late 19th century, they were met with a surprise. Under Emperor Menelik II, the Ethiopians were well prepared. They had modern weapons, strong leadership, and a united population. In 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopia defeated the Italian army in one of the most decisive victories ever by an African nation against a European power. This victory echoed across the continent, inspiring resistance movements everywhere. Ethiopia remained independent, becoming a symbol of African pride. Now, to be fair, Italy did occupy Ethiopia between 1936 and 1941 under Mussolini, but historians generally consider this a temporary occupation rather than long-term colonization. Ethiopia's resilience earned it the title, the Lion of Africa. The debated case is now, let's look at countries that some argue were never colonized, but whose history is more complicated. 5. Nepal, the Mountain Kingdom. Nepal, home to the Himalayas and Mount Everest, was never colonized outright. The British East India Company fought wars with Nepal but eventually signed the Sugauli Treaty of 1816, which forced Nepal to cede territory and accept British influence. So while Nepal remained a sovereign kingdom, it was under heavy British pressure. Nepal's independence came not through battle, but through geography. The Himalayas made it a difficult place to conquer. 6. Bhutan, the Hidden Dragon. Similar to Nepal, Bhutan maintained sovereignty by signing treaties with the British. They lost some territory but were never fully annexed. Bhutan's isolationist policies and mountainous geography helped shield it from colonial domination. 7. Iran, Persia. Persia was never formally colonized, but Britain and Russia divided it into spheres of influence in the 19th century. They controlled its economy, resources, and politics without outright annexation. So while Iran remained technically independent, it was under semi-colonial domination. 8. China, the semi-colonized giant. China is one of history's most complex cases. It was never fully colonized by a single European power. However, after the Opium Wars, China was forced into unequal treaties, surrendering ports and territories like Hong Kong and Macau. Several European countries, as well as Japan, established spheres of influence. So while China remained independent on paper, it was heavily controlled in practice. 9. Turkey, Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire controlled vast regions of the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe for centuries. Though weakened in the 19th century, it was never colonized by Europe. After World War I, parts of its territory were occupied, but the core of modern Turkey remained sovereign. Conclusion: the nations that escaped empire. So, who truly escaped colonization? The widely recognized list is Japan, Thailand, Siam, Liberia, Ethiopia, and the debated cases include Nepal, Bhutan, Iran, China, and Turkey. What unites these nations is their strategy. Some, like Ethiopia, fought with courage. Others, like Thailand and Japan, adapted through diplomacy and modernization. And some, like Liberia, were born under unusual circumstances that shielded them from empire. These stories remind us that colonialism was not unstoppable. Resistance, resilience, and clever statecraft could, and did, defy empire. So next time you look at a map, remember, not every country was conquered. Some stood free, against all odds. If you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to uncover more hidden facts with us.